Imagine waking up one morning and hearing that a small West African nation, often overlooked in the global stage, has just discovered an unimaginable treasure buried beneath its soil. Burkina Faso, a country more often associated with its struggles than with its wealth, suddenly finds itself at the center of global attention. 50 billion barrels of oil. The sheer weight of that number is enough to make anyone pause. It is not just a discovery, it is a thunderclap that echoes far beyond Africa's borders. Think about what that means. For decades, conversations about oil wealth have circled around giants like Saudi Arabia, Russia, or the United States. Countries whose names have become synonymous with energy dominance. But now, Burkina Faso has entered that conversation, and not just as a minor participant. 50 billion barrels places it on a whole new tier. Suddenly, the global map of power shifts. Nations that once dismissed Burkina Faso as a struggling landlocked country must now rethink their strategies, their alliances, and their economic outlook. The people of Burkina Faso, resilient and enduring, know what it means to live through hardship. Their history is one of resilience against colonial exploitation, political turbulence, and economic struggles. Now imagine those same people learning that beneath their feet lies enough oil to transform their lives, their future, and the destiny of their nation. The streets would buzz with whispers, excitement, even disbelief. For a farmer who has worked sun up to sundown for little reward, or for a young student dreaming of opportunities abroad, this discovery is not just about oil. It is about possibility. It is about finally being seen. But there is also a deep sense of caution. Oil has been called both a blessing and a curse. History tells us that sudden wealth can create sudden chaos. Countries across Africa and beyond have seen their resources turn into battlegrounds for corruption, foreign interference, and internal conflict. The people of Burkina Faso know this. They know that for this discovery to be a true blessing, it must be handled with wisdom, with integrity, and with vision. Because oil is not just black, gold it is power. Whoever controls it controls more than just wealth. They control the very lifeline of modern civilization. The world is already watching. Geopolitical powers are surely recalculating their moves. Energy companies, politicians, investors, and even military strategists are likely drawing new maps in secret rooms. 50 billion barrels can rewrite energy markets, shift alliances, and weaken the stranglehold that existing oil giants hold. On the world, for Burkina Faso, this attention can feel like both an opportunity and a threat. Opportunity, because with the right deals and the right governance, the nation could finally climb out of poverty and into prosperity. Threat, because the same discovery could attract predators, foreign powers seeking control. Corporations looking for profit at the expense of the people, internal divisions fueled by greed. For the average Burkinab, the news carries dreams of better schools, better hospitals, paved roads, jobs, and a life of dignity. Oil money, if invested wisely, could fund infrastructure, education, and healthcare that have long been underfunded. It could create industries, spark innovation, and give the youth a reason to hope for a future at home rather than seeking opportunities abroad. But the fear is real too. Will this wealth trickle down to the people, or will it get trapped in the hands of the elite? Will foreign companies swoop in and take the lion's share, leaving only crumbs behind? It is a pivotal moment, almost cinematic, in its drama. A nation standing at a crossroads, with history's eyes fixed firmly on it. On one path lies the chance to rise, to turn oil into a foundation for true independence and sovereignty. The other lies the risk of repeating the tragic cycles that have plagued so many resource-rich nations. The people of Burkina Faso know this story well because they have seen it unfold elsewhere. That awareness is both their shield and their burden. There is also a growing sense of pride. For once, Burkina Faso is not being defined by its poverty or instability. It is being defined by its potential, by something so vast it cannot be ignored. Young people, especially, are holding their heads higher, feeling that their homeland is finally on the verge of recognition. They imagine a new kind of future where Burkina Faso is spoken of in the same breath as energy giants, where it commands respect. where it is no longer a footnote but a headline. Globally, the tremors are already being felt. Energy markets are volatile creatures, sensitive to every whisper of discovery. Traders, economists, and analysts are undoubtedly recalculating. Affect supply chains, affect oil prices, and even undermine existing alliances. Leaders in faraway countries are likely having late-night calls asking what this means for their energy security. Because in today's world, oil is not just an economic resource, it is a strategic weapon. Whoever has it wields influence. What makes this discovery even more dramatic is the symbolic weight it carries. Africa has long been seen as a continent rich in resources, yet poor in power. Now, with a nation like Burkina Faso stepping into the spotlight, that narrative begins to crack. It tells a new story, that Africa is not just a supplier for the rest of the world, but a force capable of shaping global dynamics. For young Africans across the continent, this is more than just Burkina Faso's victory. It is proof that their lands hold untapped potential, that the future might not be written by outsiders, but by themselves. As the dust settles around this monumental announcement, emotions are swirling. Excitement, pride, fear, determination. The people of Burkina Faso are standing on the edge of something that could define generations. Their leaders are faced with choices that will test their integrity and vision. And the world, curious and cautious, waits to see how this small West African nation will handle its newfound power. The discovery of 50 billion barrels of oil is not just a story of geology or economics, it is a story of people, dreams of a nation. Ready to rise when the news broke that Burkina Faso, a landlocked West African nation, often overlooked, on the global stage, had discovered 50 billion barrels of oil beneath its soil. It was like a thunderclap that silenced skeptics and stunned the world. The sheer scale of the discovery immediately changed the way people looked at the country. 50 billion barrels is not just a number. It is a staggering volume that places Burkina Faso in the same conversation as energy giants that have long dominated the market. For decades, people saw Burkina Faso through the narrow lens of poverty, statistics, military struggles, and underdevelopment. But in a single announcement, the narrative shifted toward possibility, power, and global relevance. It is hard not to imagine the excitement within Burkina Faso itself. Ordinary citizens, who have often felt the weight of economic hardship, now suddenly see their homeland positioned as one of the richest reserves in the energy sector. It is as though a door that had been locked for generations has suddenly swung open, revealing a new horizon. The idea that a country once struggling to attract foreign investment could now become a magnet for international energy companies is a monumental shift in perception. The oil beneath the soil is no longer just black liquid. It has become a symbol of transformation, independence, and potential prosperity. The comparison to established energy players like Saudi Arabia or Venezuela is inevitable. To think that Burkina Faso, which has battled against external pressures, political turbulence, and foreign exploitation, could now sit at the same table as some of the most resource-rich nations is nothing short of extraordinary. This discovery has the potential to break long-standing patterns where African nations are seen only as dependent players in global economics. With 50 billion barrels, Burkina Faso suddenly has the leverage to write its own terms, to speak with authority, and to demand respect in an arena where respect is often reserved for those who control energy. But beyond the numbers, what makes this discovery feel so powerful is the emotional resonance it carries. For many Africans, especially those in Burkina Faso, this is not just about oil. It is about rewriting a story that for too long has been shaped by outside powers. It is about proving that greatness does not always come from the usual places, and that a nation that has been underestimated can rise in spectacular fashion. The oil discovery feels like a vindication, as if the land itself is saying, "There is more to us than you ever imagined." International reactions, of course, were swift and filled with surprise. Energy markets thrive on predictability, and a sudden new player with reserves this massive disrupts that balance. Investors immediately began recalculating. Analysts debated. how Burkina Faso's entrance would impact global supply chains. For the people of Burkina Faso, however, the discovery goes deeper than international recognition. It carries with it the hope of jobs, infrastructure, schools, hospitals, and a better quality of life. Oil wealth, if managed well, has the power to lift generations out of poverty. The thought of children growing up in a country that is no longer begging for aid, but instead charting its own economic destiny, is a powerful and emotional one. Parents who once wondered if their children's futures would be marked by struggle can now dare to dream of a brighter path. Of course, the journey ahead is not without challenges. History is full of examples where oil wealth turned into a curse rather than a blessing. Corruption, exploitation, and foreign interference have robbed many nations of the true benefits of their resources. For Burkina Faso, this discovery is a test as much as it is a gift. The oil positions them as a future global energy giant, but only if the wealth is harnessed for the people and not siphoned away by those seeking power. The question now is not whether the oil exists, it does, but whether the nation has the leadership, vision, and unity to transform it into lasting prosperity. Still, even with the challenges looming in the background, the discovery itself remains a moment of profound importance. It redefines what is possible for Burkina Faso and reshapes the global perception of African potential. For too long, Africa has been written about as a place of lack, but this find tells a different story. It is a story of abundance, of hidden strength, and of a nation that could rise to become a key player in shaping the future of global energy. Every drop of those 50 billion barrels represents not just fuel, but a chance for Burkina Faso to claim its rightful place in the world, a chance to build an economy that serves its people, a chance to inspire other African nations to believe in their own untapped potential, and perhaps most importantly, a chance to prove that even the most underestimated nations can shock the world. When destiny reveals what lies beneath their soil, when the news broke that 50 billion barrels of oil had been discovered beneath the soil of Burkina Faso, the world looked on with astonishment. But for the people of this West African nation, the story carried a much deeper meaning. For decades, Burkina Faso has been seen by outsiders as a land struggling with limited resources, burdened by poverty and overshadowed by the weight of foreign influence. But this discovery has suddenly ignited a spark of hope, a sense of possibility that perhaps the tide could finally turn. Oil is not just fuel, it is power. It is the lifeblood of economies, the foundation of industries, and the resource that nations have fought wars over. To think that Burkina Faso, a country that many in the global north have underestimated or dismissed, now holds such an enormous reserve beneath its feet is nothing short of revolutionary. This oil find is not only about wealth in the ground, it is about freedom in the future. Imagine the thought of no longer being dependent on foreign aid packages or exploitative trade deals that always seem to keep the country chained instead of uplifted. With 50 billion barrels, the conversation changes. Burkina Faso no longer has to approach the global stage with its hands outstretched. Instead, it can stand tall, demand respect, and dictate its own economic path. The psychological shift that comes with that cannot be overstated. For the youth of Burkina Faso, who often feel their dreams are limited by a lack of opportunity, this discovery is like a door opening to new possibilities. Think about what this could mean for jobs, for industries that would rise around oil, for infrastructure that could be built with revenues flowing in, for the pride of being part of a nation finally stepping into its own power. Yet beyond the money, there is something more emotional, more personal tied to this find. It's the sense of dignity that comes with the possibility of independence. For too long, nations rich in natural resources across Africa have been looted by outsiders, their wealth extracted and shipped abroad, leaving the people with little but the scars of exploitation. But Burkina Faso now has the chance to write a different story. It has the chance to say no, to refuse the old patterns, and to manage its oil in a way that serves its people first. Picture the farmer in the countryside who has worked his entire life on dry soil. Now hearing that his nation has become one of the largest holders of oil reserves in the world, For him, it is not just about the billions spoken of in news reports. It is about the hope that maybe one day his children will have schools with proper books, hospitals with medicine, and roads that connect their villages to thriving cities. For the young graduate, frustrated by the lack of jobs and forced to look abroad for opportunities, this discovery feels like a chance to stay home and build a future in his own land. On a global scale, the shockwaves are undeniable. Nations that once saw Burkina Faso as a small player now find themselves recalculating. Energy companies, foreign governments, and financial institutions are all watching closely because oil changes everything. It changes alliances, it changes trade, and it changes the balance of power. And while the world debates what this means, for markets and geopolitics, the people of Burkina Faso are looking inward, dreaming of what it could mean for them personally. There is, of course, a sense of caution. The history of oil in Africa has often been a double-edged sword, bringing wealth but also corruption, conflict, and foreign manipulation. People know that oil can be both a blessing and a curse, and that managing it wisely will determine whether Burkina Faso truly rises or falls into the same traps that others have faced. But hope is powerful, and for now, hope is winning. For the first time in generations, many in Burkina Faso can look at their country not through the lens of scarcity, but through the promise of abundance. The thought of economic independence, of not needing to bow to foreign lenders or rely on the goodwill of more powerful nations, is thrilling. It is liberating. It gives people a sense that the dignity they have long fought for is finally within reach. And that is why this discovery is about so much more than barrels of oil. It is about the dream of a nation rising, standing on its own 2 feet and showing the world that it is capable, strong, and ready to chart its own destiny. It is about shifting the narrative from dependency to empowerment, from survival to prosperity, and from being underestimated to being respected. When the announcement was made that Burkina Faso was sitting on one of the largest oil discoveries in recent history, it wasn't just the local population that felt the tremors of excitement. Around the world, in the offices of major governments, energy corporations, and financial institutions, eyes immediately turned toward this West African nation that many had overlooked for decades. The phrase "global powers are shocked and closely watching Burkina Faso's next move" is not an exaggeration. It reflects the sudden shift in attention, the kind of moment where the balance of power in global economics can start to bend. Oil has always been the fuel not only for vehicles and factories, but also for political influence. Nations that control large reserves suddenly find themselves holding a kind of leverage that money alone cannot buy. They get a seat at tables where they were once excluded, and their voices suddenly carry more weight in international negotiations. Burkina Faso, often dismissed as a small, struggling nation, now finds itself in a position where the most powerful countries in the world are forced to pay attention. Imagine the boardrooms in Washington, Paris, Beijing, or Moscow, where analysts are rushing to gather data, calculate the scale of this discovery, and forecast how it could affect global energy markets. The usual narrative of a poor African nation, reliant on aid, has been shattered, replaced by a storyline of potential power and influence. And that is why the world is watching so closely. For the people of Burkina Faso, this global attention feels almost surreal. Ordinary citizens who have lived through hardship, scarcity, and constant reminders of their nation's challenges are now hearing that their country has become a central topic of conversation among superpowers. That kind of transformation in global perception doesn't happen every day, and it carries both pride and pressure. The pride comes from knowing that their homeland, often invisible on the world stage, is now at the center of it. But the pressure comes from understanding that the eyes watching are not neutral. Global powers are not just curious, they're calculating. They're asking themselves how to benefit from this discovery, how to influence Burkina Faso's decisions, and how to ensure that their own interests are protected in this new equation. History has shown time and again that when a resource-rich African country suddenly rises in importance, foreign interference is rarely far behind. This is the double-edged sword of discovery. Yes, it gives Burkina Faso an opportunity to rise, economically and politically, but it also opens the door to external pressures, manipulations, and even attempts to destabilize the nation if it refuses to play by the rules set by powerful outsiders. And yet, this is also where the situation becomes inspiring. For the first time in its modern history, Burkina Faso has something that makes the most powerful nations hesitate. Something that forces them to deal with it not as a dependent, but as a key player. That, in itself, is a form of power. It means that decisions made in Ouagadougou now ripple across continents, and that the leaders of Burkina Faso have the chance to stand firm, to craft policies that prioritize their people, and to demand fair treatment on the world stage. For the youth, hearing that global powers are watching brings a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. Excitement because it means their nation finally matters in a way it never did before, and anxiety because they know how easily wealth can attract exploitation. Parents talk about it at dinner tables, wondering what this could mean.